Hello, everyone. Happy Memorial Day weekend. It's good to be with you again. And I know that probably a lot of you noticed that the newsletter did not go out last week. And I want to apologize for that. But, I'm in my 5th week post-op after revision surgery on my hip. So last week was a little bit harrowing. So I decided to just honor my limitations and take a little bit of a break, but we're back up and I feel great. So it's good to be with you. So let's begin the blog. The name of the blog this week is called The Illusion of Death's Doorway. And it was inspired because of the death of a friend of ours. And I wrote this before this week when all of the horror happened with the yet another school shooting, and I questioned whether or not to actually use this blog, but I think, and I'm hoping that parts of this will bring some solace to us during this difficult time. So anyway, so if my rather inconsistent memory serves me correctly, it was a beautiful sunny summer day. And I remember the purple buds on the hosta bushes that separated the grassy part of our backyard from the forest-like part with white birch and oak trees. And those little buds were abundant and they were just right for popping. I don't know why I was so obsessed with the barely audible sound of those little blooms softly exploding when I squished them between my thumb and forefinger, but I was, much to my dad's chagrin. That particular day, however, there was something else that distracted me from one of my favorite pastimes. Mom had just gathered us all together to give us some sad news. Aunt May, she said sadly, just passed away. She died, Mom clarified in case we were unclear about what passed away actually meant. Now, I was only about 7 or 8 years old at the time, but I was still old enough to understand that it was supposed to be a very sad time when someone leaves this world. Mom's expression of pain and being upset set the mood, and we all followed by dropping our heads and putting on our most sorrowful expression. Now, I wasn't very close to Aunt May. I didn't really know her very well. So the physical loss didn't really shatter my world or anything. But I knew that I was still expected to join in the sadness and pray for Aunt May. So I headed outside beyond the hostas to a gray canvas hammock that was hung between 2 large trees. And I remember this, I have a terrible memory, but this is a day I remember so clearly, laying there and trying my best to conjure up some tears so that I could offer Aunt May the sad emotions I thought were appropriate. But I couldn't find them, no matter how hard I tried. I just couldn't. I actually felt a strange feeling of joy that I knew wasn't appropriate, and it was really confusing. Years later, when I contemplated that memory, I understood. Basically, it was because I wasn't sad at all. I actually felt happy for Aunt May. Even at such a young age, I somehow knew that death was not as depressing an occasion as everyone thought it was, at least not for the person who died. I was glad that Aunt May got to go home to that incredible place that I somehow remembered in the not so far away recesses of my soul's memories. But it was a feeling, though, not actually a memory at that time. Of course, then I kind of felt ashamed that I couldn't find the sadness that I knew was appropriate. And so I tried even harder to cry. It didn't work. So I just laid there staring up at the lush green canopy above me and just drifted off into my world of daydreams and little girl fantasies. Now, why, you might ask, has this memory suddenly surfaced again right now in my life? Well, recently, a very dear friend of my husband and mine, Danny, quite suddenly made his transition to spirit. He went to bed one night, and by morning, he was gone. Last Saturday was the celebration of Danny's life gathering of all of his friends and relatives. So he and especially his wife Mary have been on my mind continuously. Steve, my husband, and I love both of them so much. We've shared so many happy memories filled with laughter, deep conversation, and actually quite a few bottles of wine as well. Danny was and still is a kind, thoughtful, generous, and funny guy. The news of his passing hit us both like a sledgehammer. We both cried, deep and mournful tears. This time my tears flowed. They flowed like a torrential rainfall. Yet they were not for Danny, because I knew exactly where he had journeyed to and how happy and peaceful he was to finally be back in that place of unconditional love and unending peace. The ache I felt in my heart and my whole body was for his wife Mary, who loved him fiercely, for his children who lost their father, and for Steve and me and his many, many friends who lost the physical presence of a man we all loved and cherished. Memories of going out on Danny's boat and cruising around the Long Island Sound together tore at my heart and both saddened and lifted my spirit at the same time. Trips to wine country on Long Island, holiday gatherings, dancing and enjoying time together at the yacht club all flooded my mind as tears continued to flow. Yet I was not grieving for Danny at all. Beneath my grief, as strange as this may seem, was a feeling of celebration and joy for the next adventure in the journey of Danny's immortal life. It was those of us that he left behind that I grieved for, knowing we would go on living without ever seeing his face or feeling his affectionate hugs, hearing his hilarious jokes, as his infectious laughter. I've studied and experienced the afterlife a lot more than most people. My curious spirit is not content to simply believe in heaven or the spirit world, which I always have. I wanted to remember it, catch glimpses of it if I could, and feel its presence here on earth as I live out my present incarnation. Through a practice of deep meditation, inner exploration, and a close near-death experience that I had, I believe that I have touched that world a bit. I've learned that the spirit world is not a far-off place. It's right here. I understand now that discarding our physical body when it is no longer needed changes our frequency and vibration, which is why we can no longer see our departed loved ones. At least most of us can. There are some of us who do have that gift and they can. That doesn't mean they can't see us, though. Just because they're no longer living in the physical world doesn't mean they are not with us. They are with us for every special occasion, every important time in our lives, and every moment of sadness when we long for their touch and their presence in our lives. And the spirit world, from the small glimpses that I've had, is far more beautiful than the most spectacular places that exist here on earth. If you have ever learned about people who have had NDEs or near-death experiences, you will discover that when faced with the truth that it was not their time to cross into the spirit world fully, and they learned that they must return to the earth plane, their first response was always to remain right where they were, in that place of love, compassion, beauty, and peace. What usually draws them back here is realizing that there's more work that they need to do in order to complete their life purpose. Therefore, though we grieve deeply for our deceased loved ones, it's important to always remember that death is an illusion. It does not exist. We are immortal beings. We cannot and will never die. Yet none of this understanding or spiritual insight, none of it can eradicate or take away the grieving process. We are still human beings with deep human emotions that must be validated and appreciated for the wisdom and growth they afford us, no matter how painful. In other cultures, death is a time of both great celebration for the loved one who moves on, but also a time of deep sorrow for those who must suffer through their grief and come to terms with the emptiness left behind after physical death. I've lost my mom, my dad, and quite a few friends from having made that transcendent transition. What helped me handle the loss, and still does, is to shift my perception of the relationship. Instead of it being physical, because we were once both here, instead of it being a physical relationship, it becomes for me a physical, spiritual one. I still talk to them out loud, and when I need to ask them for advice or their opinion, I do. And believe it or not, it is possible to hear their responses. It may take time and practice and faith and, trusting the intuitive part of ourselves that hears those messages. We may chalk it up to our imagination sometimes, but what better way to get their messages through to us than through the part of us that may still believe in miraculous possibilities that our logical mind tries to convince us is merely fantasy. So, in ending this, here's to you, Danny, my friend. I love you, and I hope you are traversing the glorious heavens in your spectacular ship, or better yet, a yacht, with all the best bells and whistles, and perhaps throwing back a cold one now and then. Enjoy the journey, my friend. And the slanche, something like that. That's supposed, he's Irish, and so that is the Irish greeting for cheers. I'll have a cold one with you, Danny, and enjoy the journey. So I hope that this gave some of us some sense of solace and peace during this. Like I said, this is a very difficult week for all of us, and I don't really want to go into it anymore. We've lived through it all week long, and it's just terrible. So I will just offer even more of our prayers. We're the best prayer warriors there are. So let us pray for the town in Texas that had to go through this, for our whole nation who's grieving over so many of these, and pray to give us strength to make the changes that we need to make in order to bring America back to the place of safety, especially for our kids. So anyway, on a little bit of a lighter note, whatever you're doing this weekend, happy Memorial Day. It's supposed to be a pretty beautiful weekend, so I hope you enjoy it. And I'll see you next time. Namaste.